Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Digital Commando show. As you know from yesterday, my name's Dave Kitchen. I'm standing in as the Digital Commando as Stefan is busy recording content for the Digital Commando Academy launch, which is on the 15th of June. Today is Team Thursday, so we're going to be talking about how to lead and inspire teams, how to create good culture in the workplace, and how to communicate effectively. I've got three brilliant guests today that I'm going to bring into the room now. We've got Jay Blake, we've got Anne Phillips, and we've got Michael Nagles. Morning, guys. How are you doing?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Great, thank you.
So I'm going to come to Jay first. Jay, would you like to introduce yourself, tell us who you are and what you do, please?
I would very much like to do that. My name is Jay Blake. I am the networking ambassador, and I spend my life building relationships and bringing together communities.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jay. Anne, would you like to go next?
Sure. My name's Anne Phillips, and my company is Mawson & Co. Associates, and I'm a coach and trainer, working specifically with culture change teams and comms.
Fantastic. Thanks, Anne. And Michael.
Well, good morning. I'm Michael Nagles with It's Easy Website Design. My company builds websites of every size and scale, and then backs them up with old-fashioned customer service long after the website launch.
Excellent. Fantastic. So I know Michael's got a little bit of experience that might not have come out in what he does now, but it's very relevant to what we're talking about today. So that's why Michael's on the show. Number one talking point. Top tips for creating a great culture in the workplace. Now, I know in the past I've created a workplace and created a terrible culture through some terrible decisions. So I'm going to start. I think I'll start with Michael on this one. How do you create a great culture, Michael? What tips have you got for the viewers?
Well, I think the most crucial part of creating a good culture is being open, honest, approachable, accessible, and transparent. I think that's the most important part of it. I've, by the fact that I have a web design company now doesn't really reveal some of the past experiences that I've had, but I've been involved in different leadership roles for 35 years now. I was thinking of that this morning. It makes me sound a lot older than I really am. These culture values are things that you build over years of experience. And a lot of times, as Dave alluded to, by getting it wrong, you got to get it wrong sometimes to get it right. And so it's essential to building a good culture to know what your values are, but also to be empathetic with the people that you're counting on to help build that culture, take into account the fact that their values may not be the same as yours. And you might have to do some work together to get a little cultural alignment.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because a lot of people, any two people are going to be slightly different. And if those values are quite misaligned, it makes it very difficult sometimes to actually create a good culture in the workplace. So that's very, very important. And I won't actually say everything I've got to say in case I'm going to steal somebody's thunder. Anne, have you got anything you want to say on that? So top tips for creating a great culture in the workplace.
I could ramble on about this for days. How long have we got? So the first thing for me would be clear, communicable visions and values, so that people in the business or wherever you're creating that culture know what it is you're aiming for. Because if people don't know what the objective is, if people don't know what you're looking to achieve, then how can you expect them to be part of that culture? The biggest thing that I talk about with clients and customers all the time is role modeling. So if you think about whoever is at the head of that organisation, they absolutely need to role model around the culture that they want to embed. So the stuff that's been going on in recent weeks is a really good example of that. So if you think about the communication about stay home, stay safe and everything else, and then the whole hoo-ha about people who didn't stay home, that's because it's a conflict in what you're communicating versus what you're doing. So it's about role modeling for me. And then the other thing is, how do you create the belief for your team? So you need to let your team know that you believe in the culture, that you absolutely eat it, breathe it, sleep it. And that's about your communication strategy, which needs to be relentless.
Yeah, that's really important. I think what you're saying about you believing in it is the culture you're trying to create has to be really in line with your own values, so that it just oozes out of you at every point.
Absolutely.
So that there's no discrepancy between what you say and what you do.
Absolutely, because people will see what you do, and that's what they will mirror. And that whole visions and values piece is so important at the start of building any culture. And actually, it's a really difficult thing to get right, because what you think are your visions and values, when you actually drill down and dig into it, actually, you might surprise yourself. And one of the questions to ask yourself when thinking about setting a visions and values suite is, can I eat, live and breathe these? Because if I can't, it's probably not the right vision.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because if you can't live and breathe it, as in you're trying to be something you're not to a certain extent, if nothing else, it's absolutely exhausting.
Yeah, it's exhausting. I said the same thing to somebody the other day. If you're trying to be something you're not, there's nothing more exhausting over a period of time than pretending. You lose track of what you've said, if nothing else.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's not what you would naturally say.
Yeah. So that they would be. I could honestly, my list is long, but
it's endless.
They're the top three.
Fantastic, thank you, Jay. What about you then? Tips for creating a great culture in the workplace.
I think the first thing I would do is I would step back and I would look at the key word in the sentence, and that's workplace. I think we have witnessed this year a complete transformation in what that means, and that I was on a call last night, and in my workplace was somebody who was in the States, somebody that was in North Wales, somebody that was in a couple of people that were in Ireland. They were in my workplace, and in that workplace, they brought all of their experience. So they brought what they understood as culture. They brought what they understood as their way of working. And therefore, actually, we now have to be very conscious of the fact that workplace is a very different place, and take all of the advantage that brings, but also be really aware that actually people are coming from very different places across the globe, and find the good in that, because there's some really exciting things around that. There's some real opportunities to enjoy that. But yeah, so I think to build culture, it would be first of all define the workplace, and in the world we find ourselves in now, that's an exciting thing.
Yeah, it's a very different world, isn't it? Because as I was saying to you before the other two joined us backstage, Jay, a company where everybody was working in an office 4 months ago, and that everybody goes to the office every day, those people aren't going to the office now. We'll assume they're still at work, but they're sat in the front room, they're sat in their box room, but they're still working and still having to communicate, and the culture's still important. From my experience, one of the things that can destroy a culture, and therefore it's very important to get this right, is hiring the wrong people. If you hire people purely based on their skills, you end up with people that are very capable of doing the job you hired them for, but aren't necessarily culturally aligned with you and your business and your team. And it can be very disruptive and blow the whole thing apart. I can see Anne nodding, because obviously you've got a lot of experience with this.
I call them, in this world, I would call them change terrorists or cave dwellers, because they'll end up being the people that make it really hard for you to embed any kind of change in your culture, because they're not aligned to your visions and values.
Yeah, one thing I wrote down was it's about how they make you feel. It's that old saying that we've heard so often said. It's not about what is said. It's not about what is done. It's about how it makes you feel. And I think that how we are made to feel in business is so important. And we so often forget that actually it's how the feeling that we leave with people that makes the difference.
Yeah, exactly. And I made a huge mistake a couple of years ago in taking on a couple of business partners that were a terrible fit. They were brilliant, almost on an employee level, almost faultless. But when it came to actually making decisions and leading, they were utterly awful, or not necessarily utterly awful, but awfully aligned with me. So they were perfectly capable, but we couldn't work together in the end because we were aiming at completely different things and we couldn't find the middle ground. And it was a terrible decision to be involved with that.
I did warn you about the big dog.
I've just muted you for a second, Dan.
Okay, he's okay now.
No. Excellent, brilliant. Okay, so let's move on to point number 2 then. How to lead and inspire your team. I think I'll come to Anne first on this one.
You've just, in your summary for the previous one, talked about some of the things that I would say are necessary for a team, and they are about clear objectives that you all understand. Because if you're misaligned on where you think you're going, it's going to create all sorts of conflict. I also think that before you can do anything to build a team, you've got to build the trust with that group of people. And that's actually the long slog. And because if you get that right, everything else is relatively easy. The things that are hard, when you've got a team. Do you want to go to someone else? I'm so sorry, everyone.
It's all right. Michael, can I just jump into you here and get your input on this one while we just let Anne quieten the dog down?
I think we can add dogs barking in the background to the list of things under the new normal now. I think that's part of the world, part of the world we live in. One of the phrases that popped in my mind when I was listening to Anne talk is that this phrase, management by walking around. And I think a big part of kind of tying the management and the leadership together is visibility and accessibility. Be out where your people can talk to you, and not just standing up and giving a presentation and writing a bunch of jargon and slogans on a whiteboard, but sitting down with a cup of coffee and talking to people. And I think that's one of the most important things to do. Everybody thinks that leadership, too often people tie the word leadership and management into one little bundle, and they think if you're a manager, you're a leader. Oh yeah. And I did it too. Dave knows this, and Jay might know this, but I was in the American Army for 10 years. That was my first, and that's where I learned my core leadership skills, was in the American Army. But one of the parts of that is that when you're in the Army, they are largely hostages as well. You want to influence them, you want to inspire them, and you want to teach them and train them. But they don't really have much of a choice either but to follow you, because they are a captive audience for however long they've enlisted for. And I went on a Friday, I was in the American Army, and on a Monday, I was a sales manager for a civilian company. That's how quickly I trained. Yeah. And I took that gung-ho, let's go guys attitude into the sales room, and they revolted. I actually stood down from that first sales management role and went back to become just a salesman. I took a sales job in that company and stayed in that role for a year to acclimatize myself to the fact that I had to be a little more influential and a little less, here we are, guys, this is the mission, let's go do the mission. And it's that culture, it's that over time sitting down and I had a fellow I worked for, because every boss has a boss. And the fellow I worked for, when I told him I thought this was the wrong role for me right now, I'm not ready for this. And he said, when you come back, he said, the one thing you have to remember is that you need people. You've got to have people or you don't have an organization. And I had this mindset when I went into my first civilian job, that I had an office and a desk and a chair, and the great part of the office was I had a door. And so go in at 9 o'clock in the morning and get a cup of coffee and talk to people, and go in and sit down and be an executive and shut the door and do stuff. but I wasn't doing the stuff with people. And that was why it just destroyed me in that first management job, first leadership job. The last real leadership role I had, because I don't really have any direct reports. Now I have some people I influence, but they don't report directly to me. There's other people there. But the last real role I had 800 team members spread out all over England, Scotland, and Wales. And I spent all of my time just going to talk to them. That's really all it was about. And I might do a presentation while I was there, but the real crust of my job was, how are you? What are you doing? How's this working? Have you got problems? What can we do? And I just spent so much time just standing there with a cup of coffee in my hand talking to team members. And we'd go out and we might have a pint and we might have a meal, but it was all just to get them to relax and talk to me.
It's because you're building that trust. And the way that I would liken that is that if you've got 800 odd people working for you, you're going to need to be able to ringmaster them. You're like a ringmaster, that you've got, and to be able to, the circus performers, if you like, need to be able to trust the ringmaster, because you're going to look after them. It's not necessarily about being able to do stuff. It's about being able to know who can do the stuff to get the objective hit, and you're only going to know that by building those relationships with people.
Building trust is huge.
Trust is that key word, and for me, the two words that sit so beautifully together are trust and consent. So building trust and gaining consent is just so key in terms of how we traverse through the world we now find ourselves in.
The trust thing. I built 2 teams in the last 3 years. And the first time it went horribly wrong because of what I said earlier on. The second time, during that first attempt, I'd got a guy working for me who was very, very good. He was very reliable. He had similar values around customer service and ethics. He had a defined working pattern he wanted to work to, and he was brilliant. And I could see a huge amount of potential in him. But the other guys that were my business partners couldn't stand the guy. They absolutely hated him, and it was ridiculous. So as soon as I started again on my own, and I said, Paul, come and work for me. We've got on well in the past. We've worked well together. Come and do a bit of work for me. And he went, all right, okay, I will. And he helped me out, and on a bit of an ad hoc basis. And we got to a stage where I said, right, do you want to run the company from sort of 8 a.m. till 5 p.m? Because you're basically doing it anyway, but I'll give you this responsibility. I'll give you these areas that are yours to look after. And if you've got any problems, just give me a call. And it got to the stage where we had a daily phone call at 3 p.m. and he'd phone me at 3 p.m. and say, right, this is what's happened today and this is what you need to know. And he'd just give me a list of things that were important. It wasn't a rundown of everything that happened in the day. It was just a rundown of the important stuff, the stuff that actually mattered to me, that was going to influence my evening or the rest of the week. But I spent time building the trust with Paul so that he knew he could trust me, and I could trust him when I said, there you go, that's yours, you go and run with that. I knew he'd absolutely nail it for me. And that was such an eye-opening moment for me personally, that it just blew my mind how important that was. And I don't think a lot of what Michael was saying about leadership and management being 2 completely different things. Managers just organize things for me. They make, this needs to be done by then, rather than actually inspire.
You manage
action.
You manage numbers, you lead people, and it's important to be able to compartmentalize that. But what you did with Paul by bringing someone like Paul in, that's incredibly crucial to building an organization, because you've got to have those subordinate leaders that you can hand stuff off to, and that you can trust, and that you will allow to make some mistakes and allow to try to do some things their own way, because otherwise it's just built around you. And I've seen organizations that are built around one person, one single person, and that's great if that person is being effective. But if your organization is built all around one person, then that one person's weaknesses will devastate the organization as well. And when you've got subordinate leaders like a Paul, one of my subordinate leaders in my last role was Dave for a while, was on a team and was in a leadership role in the organization that I led. And having people that you can trust are down at that grassroots level and are there every day, and just have them accountable to you. They don't have to call you every 30 minutes or every 2 hours, but that 3:30 check-in. I worked for a guy for about 4 years that I talked to him for about an hour a week on Monday afternoon. And we had an incredibly effective relationship. He had strengths and he focused on those. I had strengths and I focused on mine. And once a week we checked in with each other to make sure that we were on the same ladder.
Yeah.
But he would have trusted you to be able to pick up the phone if something was going wrong at any given time. It wasn't just that you put him in a box and said, you're going to speak to me at 3:00 on a Monday and that's it. So,
there were times.
So the availability to people. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's exactly the relationship I had with Paul, was that if something was going wrong from his perspective, he'd just pick up the phone and say, Dave, I've got a problem with this. What do you think? And it might be anything from not really sure how to price a piece of work, or it might have been we've let a customer down on something. Can we, and kind of sorting it out is beyond my scope. Whatever it was, he could phone me at any time. And equally, if there was something that he was doing that wasn't quite right, we had a good relationship, so I could phone him up and say, look, listen, Paul, this thing you did here yesterday, can you do it this way in future? Because and as long as I gave him a good reason and was able to show him that what he'd done wasn't necessarily wrong, but it just wasn't the best way of doing it, he'd go, oh yeah, fine, fair enough, no problem. And
but you could only give him that constructive feedback because you had a trustful relationship. You may not have, had you not had that trust in each other, where you could use the mistake to build rather than destroy. You've enabled that person to grow, but you've only done that. Sorry, that really sounds like corporate bullshit. Sorry, but you know what I mean.
Love it.
You've enabled that person to learn. Because the trust is there. I just truly believe that in any relationship, whether it's teams, individuals, whatever, you have to work on the trust. And if you spend that time, it's time well spent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Invested, isn't it?
I used to tell people when they'd say, what if I make a mistake, or what if I do it wrong? Say, look, ask when you've got to make a decision and there's no one there you can consult, and you are in a situation where you've got to do it. Ask yourself if it's legal, moral, and ethical. And if it's legal, moral, and ethical, go on and do it. And if it turns out to be wrong, we'll survive it. Some of you, I know Dave knows James Hutchison. Jay, you might know him, but James does a presentation sometimes called "We're Not Making Parachutes," and he talks about the fact that you've got to allow your organization to fail, because at the end of the day, the jobs I've always had outside the Army, we weren't making parachutes, and it wasn't likely that anybody was going to die.
We're physiologically built to make mistakes and learn that way. And actually, we go to school and we do all those, and people say, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that, don't take that risk, don't do this, don't do that. So then what we learn, rather than, it becomes a very sort of tell rather than a intuitive process where we learn. But we are physiologically built to make mistakes and grow as a species, but we don't let people do it. It's really hard.
I could go for hours about the school system as an ex-teacher. I could rant about that for days.
Oh, you don't want to come here, do you?
Right then, so we've had a question come in from Sarah Gibson. Sarah would like to know if there's anything you do with your teams to boost morale when needed. So, Jay, what do you think on that?
Beer, I think, is always the best answer to that one.
Beer.
If in doubt, when morale needs boosting, there's a phenomenal book that's called The 5 Love Languages, and I recommend that to anybody in every context. And the reason I bring that up is because when you understand what everybody in the team's love language is. So if you understand what will boost morale for everybody in the team, it will be different things for different people. So if I tell you you've done a good job and words of affirmation are your primary love language, you will feel all warm and fuzzy and everything will be amazing, and you will work for me like you've never worked for me before for the next 3.5 minutes, weeks, days, depending on how high up that tree of importance that is. Whereas if for you, gifts is important, or if for you physical touch is important, and actually just giving you a hug or presenting you with a little something that just says, wow, you did a really amazing job there. So there is no one answer. I think the reality is that we have to understand the people that are around us, particularly where teams are concerned, and we need to make sure that what we do is tailored to the people that we're working with as best we can. And that's not always possible, but I think being understanding of it and having an understanding as to what floats people's boats is really important.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I think the idea that at any level, all of this stuff has to be tailored to the individual and get to know the individual so that you can do the thing that will rock their world, rather than me doing the thing that rocks somebody else's world.
Or even worse, me do the thing that rocks my world. So my primary love language is this, and therefore everybody else must feel better if I go up and hug them. Well, no, because actually physical touch is not everybody's primary love language, and they don't want to hug, but they would really like you to. They'd really like you to hear you say you did a really good job.
Yeah, thanks.
And in front of other people.
Thanks. Appreciation. Just telling them that you appreciate what they did. And it's not always about monetary appreciation. It's not always about a good salary. That's certainly a part of the puzzle. But just telling people that was an excellent thing that you did, or that was really well done. Visibility and even I'm a big believer in league tables. I think showing teams, not individuals, but showing teams that are performing really well and giving them recognition as a high performing team is essential to boost morale as well. But kind of what Jay alluded to is just talking to, letting them know that you value the fact that they're part of your organization. Yeah. Even if they're struggling and they're not performing really well, as you coach and counsel them, making sure that they know that the reason you are coaching and counseling them is because you appreciate them and you want them to be successful.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Anne, have you got anything else to add on that one?
Just a couple of things. First of all, thanks for Sarah for asking the question, because my guess is, and I can only guess because I can't talk back to her at the moment, is that potentially she's got a team that might have been used to being in an office and are suddenly remote. And that's a real challenge in terms of how do you boost that morale. But I would absolutely back up what the guys said. It's about understanding individually what people need to feel loved, and it's about demonstrating some empathy for those individuals, so that you can do that. I used to work in a sales organisation, really big sales organisation, and there was a particular boss that wanted every time we made a sale for people to run up and ring a bell. And really? And I just said to him, you have got to be kidding me, because I'm telling you now, if you ring a bell every time I make a sale, I'm off, because I don't want people looking at me. So just because I'm in sales, the assumption was that I like to be looked at, I like to be the centre of attention. No, don't do that to me. I would much rather, actually, anybody but him came up and just said, thanks a lot. He wasn't my favourite boss ever. Probably because he kept talking about bells. But you've got to find the thing that rings the individual's bell.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, absolutely.
Not all about whiskey.
It's not. Oh God, don't give me whiskey. Rum.
I can do both. I'm good with whiskey and rum. That's fine.
Not in
and I
the
know
same
Michael's
class.
a fan of Jägermeister.
Well, no, I'm not a fan of Jägermeister. In spite of some video evidence to the contrary, I am not a fan of Jägermeister.
Was it taken later on in the evening?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's when Jaeger comes out, when
It's
everybody
5
doesn't
o'clock
know what's
somewhere.
going on.
It's 5
That's not.
o'clock.
But that's
Maybe we'll leave that one there.
yeah, Dave. You need to get this back under control.
Yeah.
That's
Right
leadership for you, right there. There we go. We saw witnessed here
Swiftly
first.
moving on. So talking point number 3 then, how to communicate effectively. And I think communication comes in many, many different forms. The sort of traditional stuff would be face-to-face, telephone, and written, either letters or emails or sort of short messages. Increasingly in this world, we're doing a lot of this sort of video chats, be them streamed live on the internet like this one, or a Zoom call, a Remo meeting, all of these kinds of things. You've got to get it in there for you, Jay.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Dave. I was waiting there on the edge of my seat. Is he going to say it? What was that one? Remote. Yes.
So whatever form that takes, it's a slightly different form of communication because it's not quite the same as face-to-face. So I'm going to come to Anne first. How to communicate effectively, both generally and in the COVID-19 world.
Oh my God. I would just say 2 words, and it's relentless communication. And it's about that. What that means for me is, go back to what we said before, is understanding that everybody's an individual. So we'll receive their messages in a different way. And the responsibility for that message landing is with the communicator. So as a communicator, you've got to think about, what is the message I need to land here? So before you do anything, before you even open your mouth, what is the message I need to land, so that you can get some clarity around it. And then once you've got some clarity about what the message is that you want to land, you can never over communicate, in my opinion. Once is never enough. I've seen that in organisations so many times, where an MD or someone will turn up and give the message and then walk away and then wonder why it doesn't land. Yeah. And in this day and age, so I'm going to give my age away, right? So when I started work, there was no such thing as email, and we had a telephone, email, broadband, no such thing, right? And I sit here and I wonder, how on earth did I communicate? My first job was to corral regional sales managers. How did I do that? And it was about knowing very clearly what I needed to get out to them and do it. And now you've got to know very clearly what you've got to say, and then think, if we sat here for an hour, we could probably come up with a list of different ways. There's email, there's websites, there's Slack, Messenger, there's hundreds of them, and there's a digital expert sitting right next to me who could tell me what all of those things are. But it's getting to people in the way that they want to hear the message.
That's it. That is it in one sentence. Communicate with people the way they want to hear it.
Yeah, it's them. It's not about you.
No.
Yeah, communicate in their language.
Yeah.
If you're shouting in English at someone who only speaks French, all the good intentions in the world will be lost. You have to. It's about knowing how they think, understanding their minds, and a lot of this comment is coming from points of bad experience, because I tend to be a very direct person. This is much better. I'm much more effective in a Zoom call or in a telephone call or in FaceTime. Email is my biggest enemy, because I'm a very direct person, and there's no tone. And so when you write an email and you start it off with, hey Bob, what's going on with this project, and why haven't we hit this mark yet? That doesn't mean I don't like Bob, but I'm just asking and I'm admitted that's my biggest enemy. Whereas, but you don't do that on the telephone, and you don't do that in a Zoom call or a FaceTime call. In those environments, where people can hear your voice and the inflection and the passion of what you're talking. But you always tend to start off with a little bit of chit chat, and you always hey Dave, how you doing? Good to see you. How's your wife? How's your son? I know Dave doesn't have a wife, and I don't know if he has a son or not. But
No, I don't.
you know, it's just, okay. But it's just that a little bit of rapport building at the beginning of the conversation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Then walk into, you know, I was just thinking about a fellow I used to work for who had a tell because he'd call. We were remote, and I was 200 miles away from him, but he was my boss, and he'd call me about once a week or so. And if he called, how did it go? It used to go, if I answered the phone and he said, Mr. Nagles, if he said Mr. Nagles, something was coming. And if he said Michael, then I just went, oh, okay, this is going to be all right. There's not going to be pain here. But if he said Mr. Nagles, yes, sir, you knew that something was coming, and that kind of rapport building in a single conversation can make or break where you're going with it. Mm-hmm. And especially if you've got lots of people and you're having to have lots of conversations. You know, that last role I had with 800 people, I had 22 direct reports and 100 area leaders who reported to the regional leaders, and then all those other people that reported to the other tiers. And I was on the phone all day. It's all I did was talk on the phone and talking on the phone and send an email.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because it's a whole suite of stuff that brings that communication thing back.
Yeah.
It's not just the words you use. It's not those. You're talking about your example made me think of a particular place I worked where there was a room downstairs. And if you got a phone call from your boss and can you come and meet me in the room downstairs, you'd go to the toilet on the way because you knew that you were, you know, it was like, oh my God, it's the sacking room.
Yeah.
You know, but people knew that was the messaging that the bosses had put out there, that's the bad room.
Yeah. I worked with another guy who, when he was going to fire someone, his way of doing it was to walk into him and say, hey, let's go get a Coke somewhere. And that basically meant
to work for.
and that, you know, we all knew, and a lot of the employees didn't know because they hadn't seen this guy operate, but the ones that have been around for a while knew that if he said, come on, let's go get a Coke, you should grab all your personal stuff and take it with you because you're not coming back. You're not coming back.
Your leaving gift.
Fantastic. Jay, have you got anything to add on the communication?
I think we've had that all, to be fair. I think, as we've said, it's about, it is so much around what is it, how do people want to hear it rather than how do we want to say it. So people will regularly say to me, I'll drop you an email. And it's like, no, I've got emails by the 1,000 that are unread. I mean, literally by the 1,000 that are unread. So it'll go in there and I might one day see it or not, or be able to afford a VA who'll go through it all and clear it all down for me one of these days. But yeah, communicate with me, drop me a message, pick up the phone.
It's really easy to be ruder than we'd ever be in real life with an email, isn't it? I'm just going to ignore it. I'm going to ignore it. It's the written equivalent of hanging up on somebody, which we would probably not do unless it was a PPI caller or something. But I talk to clients all the time saying to them, why is your first point of communication with anyone an email? Why? It's the easiest thing to do, to just leave it in your inbox or in your junk.
And worse than that is cross-contamination, by which I mean, if I have a problem, I might reach out via Twitter. The thing that will annoy me more than anything is the first message that comes back that says, please communicate to me via email. It's like, no, I'm using Twitter because it's where I'm comfortable. If you're somebody, it's like if I pick up the phone to you and say, Anne, I've got a problem, can you help me? And you say, actually, can you just come round to the door, please, because I want to talk to you about this face to face. It's like, no, I've picked up the phone for a reason.
It's adapting my style to suit what you need because you've reached out to me, so I have to play in your ballpark. It's that simple.
Yeah. And one of the things for me is one of the things that drives me mad as a person is I've got so many different platforms by which I communicate with people. You know, I've got WhatsApp, I've got Facebook Messenger, I've got old school SMS, I've got phone calls, I've got Facebook video chat, I've got Zoom, I've got Remo, I've got StreamYard. It goes on and on and on and on. But the reason I do that is I've now, when somebody I want to talk to somebody, I can talk to them wherever they are comfortable.
Yes. Yeah.
So if you're comfortable sending me old school SMS, fine, I'll send you old school SMS back. I don't desperately like it as a platform because messages are short and you can't tell if it's been read and pictures are a bit iffy and all, loads of things, technical things. Yeah. But if that's where a given person is comfortable, that's what I'll do. Just going back to something Michael said, I can be quite a sarcastic person, which doesn't go well quite often. It didn't go very well for me very early in my career. I don't think I'm allowed to tell you who I used to work for. So being sarcastic didn't go well for me. And that was face to face. In an email, that doesn't come across at all.
No.
So an email loses all personality for me. When I send an email, it becomes very, very formal because it can't really be me. But if somebody wants communication by email, then they can have it. But I am a bit like Jay in a sense that I've got an email box with, I think, around 7,500 unread messages in it. Now, admittedly, most of those are absolute junk. They are just marketing emails and spam and, all sorts of crap that I don't actually need. But
I'm surprised there isn't a VA somewhere watching this and sending in questions.
I'm telling you, all three of you need to get a good PA to manage that email. I'm sorry, but I don't mean to.
Do you know one, Michael? Just out of interest, in that little black book of yours, have you got a PA you recommend?
I've got 3 I could recommend to you without blinking.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, they are all 3 exceptionally talented and diligent. I hate to leave the office every day without a completely empty email box. I use an email program called Spark, which is really good about letting you organize emails and diarize stuff. So if you send me an email about an event that we're doing 3 months from now, I can put it in my diary for 2.5 months from now, and it disappears, and then it comes back in time to look at it. But I can't leave every day without emptying, completely flushing out my email box.
That is exactly what we've been talking about throughout the conversation, because that's how you like to operate. But obviously, it's not how we like to operate. Yeah. So if you came and looked at our inboxes, you'd be like, I was going to say tearing your hair out, Michael, sorry.
Why do you think I'm bald?
Okay.
We'd probably look at yours and go, wow, that's a bit, that's a bit clinical.
My wife, every once in a while, I'll be sitting next to my wife or standing next to her, and she'll pick up her phone, and I can see that little Google Mail, Gmail thing where it says 2,000 emails, and I'm like, what is going on there? What if somebody has died and left us money, and you can't be bothered to read the email saying you need to call us and tell us where to send the money? So it drives me crazy.
So yeah, I just thought I would check, and here's me being blatantly honest here. I have 4 email boxes, and the honest answer is 7,900, 2,700, 4,975.
But how many of those are just junk mail from lists you've signed up to or newsletters you're on?
Yeah. As I say, it needs a good VA to give me a week of their time, a very comprehensive special. We'll get it sorted out for you, right? Because it probably isn't worth it. But yeah.
It's crazy, and I periodically try and go through and delete emails because I go, well, I've not opened it for 6 months, so I obviously don't really care what's in it. So it can just go now. Because if it's that, I always work on the theory.
Go on, Dave. Say what you were going to say. I really liked what you were going to say. It was great.
If it's really important, email is not the way to communicate it. If it's urgent, email is certainly not the way to communicate if something is urgent.
Email is good for documenting, and I like email in certain aspects for that. But if I have a conversation with a customer to keep myself organized, if I have a conversation on the phone with a customer now, I'll document that with just a few bullet points, just following up on our conversation.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to do this and I'm going to do this, and this is when we're going to do it. Here's an email documenting it, because then I can diarize that email. And if there's a deadline in there, it comes back up in the process. But I've started, you know, we do discovery calls, what we call discovery calls with customers, that it's easy to find out what they want to do, what their vision is for their website, because we build websites. If I hadn't mentioned that, good time to do it. So, but we start that off with just a conversation, and quite often I'll say, "Why are we talking? What are we doing here? What's not going right with your current website?" And having that conversation on the phone. But after that, then the conversation could be moved to something like email or chat. And I'm like Dave. I've got every conceivable channel. You know, Dave and I talk a lot on Facebook Messenger. You know, I've got WhatsApp here. I've got iPhone Messenger, and so all of those channels are good because they're instant, and you don't have to have a long conversation. I don't mind texting because you can say, "Hey, you've got a package here at the office." Great. I don't have to have a 5-minute conversation where I ask you how your dog is and all of that stuff. You just tell me that I've got a package at the office. But sometimes you need more detailed conversation. I've grown to love Zoom during lockdown far more than I ever did, because I can meet face to face with people, but I don't have to drive 40 minutes to get there. And you know, it will change the way that I do business now. And I've always been a fan of stuff like this, but people by and large weren't. And if you're trying to convince someone to do business with you, but first you have to convince them to download Zoom and install it and log in and all of that stuff, that is a tough sell. Now, the lockdown has made that so much easier.
They've had the burning platform to create the belief.
Yeah,
so the burning platform, blimey, is a pretty robust burning platform, I'd say, you know. But before, people have resisted using Zoom and using these kinds of technologies to meet. But suddenly you can't. So you do something different, or you fade into the background. So the belief suddenly, to bring it back to the talking points, and you know how to create the culture and that kind of stuff. The burning platform has absolutely created the belief. And
absolutely, and the joy of it is that actually, now that we've had that burning platform, and now that people have got used to things like Zoom, we can then take that one step further, and I'll follow Michael's example and say that actually we don't all have to have the Muppet Show experience. So it doesn't have to be 500 people all in Zoom with everybody going where they're told. Actually, there are other platforms, so Remo being one really great example, that gives the control to the visitors, to the people actually who are there, and they can choose who they talk to, so they still get that in-person networking experience while based at home.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Right then, so I think we're pretty much at the end of the show. So I'm going to whiz around the room, and just for anybody that wasn't watching at the beginning or didn't catch the start of the show, just give us a reminder of who you are, what you do, and how viewers can get in touch. So I'll come to you first, please, Jay.
Great. Well, I'm Jay Blake. Jay Blake Marlowe finds me on most of the social media channels, so both LinkedIn, Facebook. And what I do is I bring communities together. So I host events and I resell a platform called Remo, which enables, as I mentioned a little while ago, you to experience online networking in a very face-to-face way. And I'd love to show you around if you have got any questions about that.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jay. I can definitely give a testimonial for Remo. It's a brilliant platform. I've been using it as a user and running events in it myself, and I love it. And if you could give us a quick synopsis of who you are, what you do, and how people can get in touch.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me on today. That was lovely. My name is Anne Phillips and my business is Mawson & Co Associates. I'm a coach and executive trainer essentially, but focusing very much on culture change, building teams, and creating phenomenal pipelines of teams, of staff. So that's what I do. You can reach me on all of the normal platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook, web, all of those kind of things. So thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Anne. And finally, Michael, same for you, please.
Well, I wouldn't want to be left out by saying that Remo is a great platform, and I think I'm doing this more because it's the unknown platform out there right now. But it's far better for networking events than any of the other ones that are going around. So if you run a networking event, talk to Jay about Remo.
Thank you, Mike.
Checks in the mail, right? Checks in the mail, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, but I am Michael Nagles with It's Easy Websites. Like Ann and Jay, I'm easy to find everywhere. I'm on Twitter under @MichaelNagles. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook, and just anywhere you want to reach out. But my company builds websites. We have our own editor. We build websites that customers can maintain, but the real core of our business is providing great customer service and ongoing support long after the website goes live. So we don't just launch a website and walk away. We stay there with you. We become a part of your team to help your business grow.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all three of you for being on the show. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day. I've really enjoyed today. It's been a great show. For the viewers, thank you very much for watching. The only thing we ask is that if you have enjoyed the show, if you've got value from it, if you found it funny or entertaining, if you could share it with your friends, pay it forward, tag them in the comments, hit the share button. That would be really appreciated. We're back tomorrow with Fitness Friday, and I will be standing in again because the boss is in the recording studio all day. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you in the morning.